This is our second episode looking at moles. If you haven't heard the first one, I recommend you go and look at that first. So when using moles to balance equations, you need to know that moles equals the mass divided by the relative formula mass. And if you know those, if you know the mass and the relative formula mass of each substance, you can then use this equation to work out the number of moles of each substance from a balanced equation. So if there are 2 moles of aluminium and 2 moles of chromium and 1 mole of chromium oxide, which is Cr2O3, and also 1 mole of aluminium oxide, Al2O3, what would balance the chemical equation? So if you've got 2 aluminium and 1 chromium oxide, then you need to make sure you have 2 chromium atoms on both sides. You need to make sure you have 3 oxygen atoms on both sides, and you need to make sure you have 2 aluminium atoms on both sides. So if we know the mass and the relative formula mass of each substance involved in a particular reaction, then you can work out the moles of each substance and form a balanced equation. In chemical reactions, it's important to use up a reactant completely. Now, a reactant that is completely used up is called a limiting reactant because the reaction stops once it's used up. So, for example, in neutralizing an acid, it's important that no acid remains after the reaction, and this is achieved by using an excess amount of the other reactant. Now, all excess means is more than is necessary. So to recap that, a reactant is completely used up in a reaction, then it is called the limiting reactant. How do we describe it when more of a reactant is used than is necessary? Remember, that is what we call an excess. When a substance is dissolved in solution, we use the solution's concentration to calculate the number of moles. We can measure concentration using different units. So, for example, we can use grams per decimeter cubed, and we can also use moles per decimeter cubed. So for grams per decimeter cubed, in order to get an answer in these units, we must divide the mass of the total solid in a solution by the volume of the total solution. And for moles per decimeter cubed, we need to divide the number of moles of a dissolved solid in a solution by the total volume of that solution. So what is the concentration of a solution made up of 8 moles of sodium chloride dissolved in 2 decimeter cubed of water? Now remember, we just mentioned how to work out the concentration. So to work out the concentration, you take the moles and you divide it by the total volume. So if we've got 8 moles and we've got 2 dm cubed of water, we do concentration equals 8 divided by 2, which will give us 4 moles per dm cubed as that concentration. So what do you need to know to calculate the number of moles of a substance? We need to know the mass and the relative formula mass, or MR. So a number of moles of a solid dissolved in a solvent determines the mass of the solute in the solution. So the units that concentration can be measured in, they are grams per decimeter cubed and moles per decimeter cubed. When neutralizing an acid, it's important that there is no acid left over in the reaction, and to make sure this happens, we use an excess amount of other reactants. And what an excess means, it's just more than necessary. And remember, there are 2 ways to calculate the concentration. If you want to calculate the concentration in grams per dn cubed, we take the mass and divide it by the volume. If we want to make out the concentration in moles per dm cubed, we take the number of moles and divide it by the volume. And those units again are grams per dm cubed and moles per dm cubed.